Monsignor Guido Maria Conforti died in Parma on the 5th of November 1931. He left behind two families that mourned his passing, the Diocese of Parma, which he had served as a priest for 24 years, and the Xaverian Institute he had founded 36 years previously. His final departure from this life had been marked by many farewells. The most important farewell took place in 1928 on the banks of the Yellow River in China, where he had gone to meet his missionaries. As soon as Monsignor Conforti had entered the Changzhou Cathedral, he began to sing the Te Deum to thank God for allowing him to see the fulfillment of his missionary vocation in the work of his missionaries. At the end of that extraordinary visit, he murmured,
"Lord, my eyes have seen. Now I can go in peace."
Some photographs of that trip still survive today, and one of them is a close-up of Monsignor Conforti, which was taken during his journey on the Trans-Siberian Railway. He's wearing a Cossack hat with a radiant smile on his face and bright eyes that seem to be looking into the future. At the peak of his human and Christian maturity, Bishop Guido Conforti expressed his providential vision of history, which made him a man who was both optimistic and close to people.
The times are sad, but the book of God's wonders is not closed. His most beautiful wonders are the ones performed by grace in human hearts.
Another photograph dating back to 1930 portrays him in the mountains on horseback with a hand raised in blessing towards the people who were welcoming him on a pastoral visit. This was his fifth pastoral visit to the 304 parishes of his diocese. One evening in Pagazzano, he coughed up some blood, the first sign of his illness. Some months later, on the 25th of October, the feast of Christ the King, Conforti visited his institute for the last time and then went home to Bishop's house to die close to his cathedral. As soon as the largest bell of the Romanesque cathedral announced his imminent death, people rushed to see him again for the last time. On his deathbed, after pronouncing the profession of faith, he exclaimed,
"Lord, save my clergy and my people from error and from unbelief."
Huge crowds lined up to say their last farewell to him. Monsignor Conforti was buried in his cathedral. In 1942, his remains were moved to the Church of the Mother House, located in the San Martino. Today, the church is a sanctuary dedicated to him. Guido Conforti was born in Casalora di Ravadese, near Parma, on the 30th of March 1865, the eighth of 10 children born to Rinaldo Conforti and Antonia Adorni. He attended a primary school in Parma, which was run by the De La Salle brothers. Along the street leading to the school there is the church Chiesa della Pace in Borgo delle Colonne. Guido entered this church every day and stood by the crucifix.
I looked at him, and he looked at me, and it seemed he was telling me many things.
Later, as a bishop, he recalled this experience. His encounter with that crucifix inspired his vocation to the priesthood. In spite of his father's opposition, Guido entered the seminary in 1876. At that time, Monsignor Andrea Ferrari was rector and would later become Guido's guide. Even though Conforti was still a seminarian, he was appointed vice-rector and kept the same job even after his ordination, proving to be an excellent educator. During his seminary years, Conforti began to read a biography of St. Francis Xavier, the Jesuit missionary who had announced Christ's message all over Asia to Sichuan, an island in front of China, where he died in 1552. Conforti was fascinated by Francis Xavier's character and missionary vocation. He had been to Mozambique, India, Malaysia, and Japan. Francis spoke to people, the poor, convicts, lepers, pearl divers, and Buddhist monks. He walked for days on end and bravely traveled by sea on unsafe junks with the risk of running into pirates and bandits. He also had to endure hunger, thirst, and loneliness. Francis Xavier was possessed by a great and impossible dream: China, the boundless celestial empire. How could the mysterious land of art, science, and wisdom remain impervious to the gospel? China remained a dream, and Francis died, catching a glimpse of it from the island of Sichuan, just outside the city of Canton. Thus, Conforti felt encouraged to continue the unfinished work of Francis Xavier, who inspired his new missionary vocation. Initially, Conforti turned to the Jesuits, then to the Salesians, expressing his explicit intention to go to a mission. The Jesuits replied that their order would not accept any conditions. Don Bosco thanked him for his offer, but the letter made no mention of his request, and Conforti was left alone with his dream. At this point in his life, Conforti was struck by illness, and it seemed destined to bar him even from the priesthood. His companions moved on to ordination while he waited for the miracle of his recovery. Guido clung to the Virgin Mary, visiting her sanctuaries in Bologna and Fontanellato. Once he had overcome the obstacles of his frail health, Conforti was ordained priest in Parma on the 22nd of September 1888. The following day, he celebrated his first Mass in the sanctuary of Fontanellato, Parma, as a thanksgiving to the Virgin Mary for restoring him to health. The refusal of the Jesuits and the Salesians did not discourage Conforti from pursuing his missionary ideal. On the 9th of March 1894, he wrote a letter to Cardinal Ledokowski, the prefect of Propaganda Fide, in which he outlined with a certain degree of boldness the plan for the institute he wanted to found. He wrote,
"Its only aim is to preach the gospel in the infidel lands. I will preferably ask for the mission to Asia, because it's the land with the highest number of infidels, and it was the field of the sublime apostolate of Francis Xavier, from whom the seminary shall take its name and inspiration."
Thus, on the 3rd of December 1895, the feast of St. Francis Xavier, Conforti inaugurated the Emilian Institute for the Foreign Missions, which was officially recognized on the 3rd of December 1898 as St. Francis Xavier Society for the Foreign Missions. In March of the following year, Conforti consigned the cross with great joy to Father Caio Rastelli and Deacon Odoardo Manini, the first two Xaverian missionaries to leave for China. Another serious obstacle, a financial problem, threatened the beginning of a Xaverian missionary's life. After a national lottery failed to raise funds, Conforti reached the following conclusion:
Perhaps God is trying to tell us that we must place our faith more in the works of His glory rather than in human resources. We must trust His loving providence, which works miracles too when these are necessary.
In spite of all the obstacles, the first stone of the present Xaverian's mother house was laid on the 24th of April 1900 in the Campo di Marte. Monsignor Magani, the Bishop of Parma, greeted the event with prophetic words.
When my bones rest in the cemetery of the Villetta, the day will come when from this blessed nest the eagles of the gospel will take the fate to those who are prisoners of the darkness and the shadows of death. And my bones shall rejoice at their peaceful conquests. Parma shall send them and follow them with admiration and love.
Indeed, until 1945, hundreds of missionaries left from this place to travel to China. After China, it was the turn of Japan, Taiwan, Bangladesh, Indonesia, the Philippines, Congo, Burundi, Sierra Leone, Chad, Cameroon, Mozambique, Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, the United States of America, Great Britain, and Spain, the native country of Francis Xavier. Today, the Xaverian missionaries are an international congregation. Conforti's missionaries are working today even among the young churches. It really does seem like a miracle. Conforti continued to serve as Vicar General in Parma until Pope Leo XIII appointed him Archbishop of Ravenna. On the 11th of June 1902, the day of his episcopal ordination, Conforti made his religious vows together with a vow to dedicate himself without reserve to announce the gospel ad gentes. Unfortunately, poor health, divisions and conflict among the clergy and mutual misunderstandings forced him to resign as Archbishop of Ravenna after just 2 years. His return to Parma raised doubts in the minds of some people. Conforti saw this retreat as a providential opportunity to recover his health and consolidate his institute. In 1904, he sent missionaries to China, Fathers Luigi Calza, Giovanni Bonardi, Antonio Sartori, and Giuseppe Brambilla. When he gave them the crucifix, he told them,
"The crucifix is the great book from which the saints took their inspiration, and we must do likewise. All the teachings contained in the Gospel are summed up in the crucifix."
Pope Pius X appointed him coadjutor to the Bishop of Parma with the right of succession.
"We are two who ask from you the same charity that you can and must do for us, although it costs you a sacrifice."
He was to take charge of his diocese in 1907 and govern it for nearly 25 years. Guido Conforti found himself fighting a difficult battle on different fronts. As a pastor, he had to endure the defections of some of his priests, who were overwhelmed by the theological current of modernism, the social disorders tainted with anti-clericalism that threatened the city and the countryside, and the religious ignorance of his people. He spared no effort in his attempts to deal with these problems, applying goodness and firmness in the process. Religious education was the key point of his pastoral work. He made 5 pastoral visits, during which he had to cope with countless hardships, celebrated 2 diocesan synods, established and promoted the Catholic action, especially for young people. He took special care of his clergy's cultural formation and holiness, the training of lay people, Catholic associations, the Catholic press, missions to the people, and the Eucharistic, Marian and missionary congresses. Monsignor Conforti added new initiatives to his episcopal commitments and to those of his missionary institute. He was active in spreading the pontifical missionary works. He collaborated with Father Manna in the foundation of a pontifical missionary union and was its first president. Conforti truly believed that preaching the gospel ad gentes was the principal method for the evangelization of his people. During these years, Conforti experienced the joy of sending several Xaverians to China. In 1912, he ordained bishop in the Cathedral of Parma Father Luigi Calza, one of his missionaries who had been appointed bishop of Changzhou in China. Another important date in the history of the Xaverian Institute is the 15th of August 1921, when Monsignor Conforti finished his testament letter, in which he presented the Xaverian constitutions that had received the final approval of the Pope. In 1928, he went to China to visit his missionaries, thereby confirming the bond of communion between the Church of Parma and the young Church of West Onan. However, the apparent improvement in the morale of his missionaries, which was one of the aims of his visit, did not bring about the results he had hoped for, and in reply to a memo from China, he wrote,
"There is nothing left for me to do except trust exclusively in the one who governs all minds and hearts."
Conforti returned to Parma and resumed his pastoral activity, but his health worsened and he died peacefully on the 5th of November 1931, after receiving the sacrament of the sick, Viaticum, publicly professing his faith and praying to God for his clergy and his people. The whole city of Parma took part in his funeral, and Monsignor Cazzani, the Bishop of Cremona, wondered aloud during his homily.
Is this a funeral or a triumph? Is this the funeral of a man who fell under the sickle of death? Or is this the triumph of a saint exalted to the glory of heaven?
Over the years, Monsignor Conforti's charisma and holiness gained momentum. The heroic nature of his virtues was recognized in a decree issued on the 11th of February 1982, while the decree on the miracle which took place in Burundi through his intercession dates back to the 6th of April 1995. On the 17th of March 1996, Guido Maria Conforti was beatified by Pope John Paul II. Before the whole Church, the Pope thus described the message of his life.
Divine providence wanted him to experience all the power of the urgency of the mission ad gentes, on the one hand, and, on the other hand, the responsibility towards the local church of which he was the pastor. Through the action of God's grace, this apostolic tension proved particularly fruitful in him, and today the whole Church can recognize it as a shining example of missionary spirit, which we could define as fully pastoral and Catholic, that is to say, consisting of a constant and balanced cooperation between communion and mission, between taking care of the community and reaching out to those who are not yet a part of it.
Those who study his life thoroughly marvel at this vast, passionate and far-sighted activity. In his own words, Monsignor Conforti laid his own little stone to build the great building of which Christ is the cornerstone, even when he had to face extraordinary difficulties and sufferings. Blessed Guido Maria Conforti's missionary project was rooted in the merciful gaze of the crucified Christ. Those who had the good fortune to be in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome for his beatification, which took place together with the beatification of the great missionary and bishop Daniele Comboni, experienced Christ's universal church through the prayers, songs, gifts, and the dances of the representatives of various countries. The Catholic Church can now thank God for the gift of this missionary bishop, who was a forerunner of the spirit of the Second Vatican Council. The bishops, missionaries and Christians who draw near to the meek and strong character of Blessed Conforti see in him a total abandonment to the irresistible strength of the Gospel, which is found only in the saints. Today, this Catholic bishop's lifestyle still encourages those who have chosen to continue Christ's mission to be even more audacious in reaching out to the poorest and most distant peoples.
Verso di lei con coraggio devi navigare. Gli occhi, le mani, te stesso